So every week I get messages from people who are over the age of 50, very much like myself. I'm 57 years old, and just to introduce myself briefly, I'm based in Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. I've been doing triathlons on and off for the best part of 40 odd years. My first triathlon was back in 1983 in Nepean, and I haven't been doing them consistently all of that time. As with everyone, what happens is as life does get in the way every now and again, you get busy, especially during those phases where you have a young family and things like that, or you're starting a business and you just get busy. You put weight on and you eventually find yourself where very quickly you've snuck up to 100 odd kilos, which I've done on several occasions, and you have to find a way of getting that weight back off and starting to feel a little bit human again, or a little bit better again. So if you've come across this video, I'm guessing you're probably in that same situation. You're in your 50s, you now have a little bit more free time, and you're looking at, okay, how do I drop a little bit of this weight that I've accumulated over the years, and how do I get myself fit and start to feel a little bit like I felt in my 20s and 30s again? And you're not alone. As I said earlier, every week I get several messages, and quite a few to be honest, from people who are in that same boat and saying, well, how do I start? What do I do? We've followed your journey for the last 2 seasons. We've seen you come from literally 100 odd kilos to where you've progressed through to that 78, 80 kilos, and you're going to these local events and you're making the podium in your age group. So what I say to those people is it's really just about, firstly, consistency. It's not about going out with high motivation, which we all have at the start, and smashing yourself. And that it brings me to probably the number one thing that I see with most beginners is they always go out, and it's good you have all that enthusiasm there, but you work too hard and too often, and there's no structure to your program and the way you're doing your sessions. So saying that, let's briefly touch on to, if I'm starting again, and look, as I've said, I've done this a few times now over the different years. I've allowed my weight to run away. I've not trained for a few years, and last time in particular, I spent the best part of 7 years training and involved in the racehorse industry, where anyone who knows anything about that industry, it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you don't get a lot of time for yourself because all your care is about the animals that are in your care, and that's the horses and making sure they're so literally I was getting up in the early days when I was still working a job as well as training. I was getting up at 3 in the morning. I was driving the horses to the track, which was half an hour away from where we're living. We were working the horses, we were driving them back, we were feeding them, getting them prepped for the day, and then I would be in the car and heading to work by 7:45. I'd leave work at 5 p.m. I'd fight the traffic home, get home sometimes at 6 o'clock, and then spend another hour and a half working those horses and feeding them and rubbing them and doing everything you need to put them to. And the only days off were really Sundays, and even that day we used to take them to the beach for a bit of a wade in the water, or we'd be taking them to a race somewhere if there was a race. I never really got a break, and it did allow, like a lot of people in their life, that weight to creep up, and really no fitness on my part. So going back to our training, what I always said about consistency really applies. Now, if you're kicking off and you're starting, the first thing I'm going to recommend is you go see your doctor and just have a proper checkout. Get some blood works done, see where you're at on that side, see where your cholesterol's at. Remember, we're not 20 anymore, we're in our 50s. Make sure you do that before you kick off. Make sure that you let your doctor know, look, I want to get back into sort of some health routine. Is there any things that I should worry about? The second thing I'm going to do is go out and purchase yourself a heart rate monitor. And why I say that is if you don't have something that can take your heart rate, you're going to need that in your training. There's some great products out there, and that you don't have to spend $800-900 to kick off. You can just get yourself a very basic, simple heart rate monitor that just shows you where you're at. If you've got an Apple Watch, you'll probably find that already does that. So have a look at what you've got. Now, as far as sessions goes, what should we be doing? So when we first kick off, what I'm going to suggest is we do 3 swims, 3 bikes, and 3 runs per week. Now, how we structure those I'm going to talk about in a minute, but the bikes, each session itself should be broken down into several different sessions. So if we're doing 3 swims, do a technique session, do a sort of a session where you're throwing in a few moderate intervals type things, but remembering that we want to have about 80% of our time in that zone 2 heart rate. Now, as far as the heart rate zones goes, I'm going to put a link in the description of this video to my resource pages. There's a heap of free resources there, which includes the heart rate calculator. So it'll help you work out where your heart rate zones are to help you with this training. But remember, and keep in your head, you want 80% of your time to be done in zone 2. You want to build that aerobic base. And in fact, for the first few weeks, you don't even want to do anything outside that zone 2. You just want to get out there and you want to be consistent with your training and getting yourself into a routine. So 3 swims, 3 bikes, and 3 runs. Now the running, you're going to have to build up slowly, and why I say that is because running is one of those sports that can create a lot of injuries and create injuries quite quickly, because it does involve, it's a very high impact type sport. Now with your running, I suggest that if you haven't run for a while, look at where your heart rate zones are, keep yourself in that zone 2 heart rate, and that could require you slowing down and walking until it drops back down and then starting again. I've just had literally the best part of 4 weeks not running due to a grade 2 calf tear. Now what I'm going to be doing is exactly that. My first run will not be longer than 15 minutes. And I'm going to say probably a fair amount of that's going to be walking, and then a little bit of running, and then a little bit of walking again. There's nothing wrong with doing that when you start off. With your swimming, if you haven't swum before, you might only find yourself a 25-metre pool somewhere, and you might only be doing 25-metre lengths with a good little bit of a break at the end and then 25 metres again. But remember, this is not about the first few weeks, and break it into 4 different phases in your training. And do a 4-week phase for foundation, and then a 4-week phase for building, increasing the volume, adding a little bit of intensity, and then a 4-week phase for heading into maybe your first race or your first little triathlon. At the end of each 4 weeks, so just build week 1, build week 2, build week 3, and at the end of that, the 4th week, I'd like you to reduce your volume by about 30 to 40%. And what that does is that gives you what we call adaptation, and that is where you build your fitness. Week 1, week 2, and week 3 are really about just adding in a little bit of fatigue to your body, but also getting into that routine. And that word's going to come back again, that consistency, just being consistent with your workouts. Another thing I'm going to say is if you miss a workout, don't try to make it up. Leave it be. And that's a very, very common mistake I see a lot. And I used to do it as well. I just try to focus on the volume that I was doing each week. And if I missed a workout, I would panic that I wasn't making it. Leave it alone, move on to the next, and leave it where it is. So life does get in the way still, and sometimes we have to miss a session, and that's quite okay. You know, we're not trying to be an elite athlete. So what does our weekly structure look like? And I'm going to throw up just a simple structure here that you look at, and how, if we're doing 3 bikes or 3 swims, 3 bikes and 3 runs, how are we going to structure that in our week? So what I'm going to recommend is pretty much what I do myself with the structures, is I have Monday as a complete rest day or just an active recovery day. Now that might just be a walk with the dog, it could be a little bit of stretching and mobility, or it could be a light swim or a light bike, but it won't be really specific training. It'll just be allowing the body to recover generally from what I've done on the weekend. On the Tuesday morning, I might go for a bike ride. And that bike ride, and depending on where I'm at in my training, that bike ride might just be, once again, a recovery roll, something along those lines. At lunchtime, I'll probably head to the pool and I'll have a swim. On the Wednesday, I will go and I'll introduce my first run of the week. Wednesday afternoon, I'll be doing some stretching and some mobility and some strength work. On the Thursday, I'll be doing another bike in the morning and then another swim during the lunch break. On the Friday, I'll be doing a run in the morning and then a strength recovery session in the afternoon. On the Saturday, I generally go out and do my very much zone 2 longer endurance rides, and they build up in volume depending on the race, and maybe a little short brick run off the bike. Now for your first 4 weeks, if you're just kicking off from scratch, ignore the brick run off the bike on the Saturday, just do your bike ride. And I've got memories of doing my first, long, 2-hour ride, which back then was my long ride, and I'd literally sit in the driveway unable to do much more when I got home. So that showed me a few things. 1, I worked too hard and I went too far for my long ride, and 2, I wasn't quite ready for running off the bike either. Now Sunday morning will be my 3rd swim for the week, and it will more than likely be an open water swim. Where I'm based in Brisbane, we have a great little swim group that does open water swims a few times a week, and sometimes I like to visit that on Sunday. And that helps for a few reasons. It gets you used to being out where you're not following a line up and down a pool. You can also practice swimming on other people's feet, so a little bit of drafting. You do get a drafting benefit in the water. And it can also help with just that, a little bit of a swell, a few other people around you, which you're going to experience on race. Sunday afternoon, I will generally go out and do a long run. if I'm just doing the shorter distances. If I'm doing a longer course races, and I don't recommend anyone as a beginner doing that, I'll actually do my long ride on the Wednesday and my long ride on a Saturday. And then on the Sunday, it'll just be a recovery run. And the reason I do that is I found that as I get older, I'm struggling to be able to back those longer sessions up. So it's giving myself a little bit more. Once again, if you've made it this far in the video, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please throw them down in the comments. If you click across to the resource, to my resource page, you'll also see there's a little link where you can book, no obligation, just a simple 30-minute Zoom phone call with me. You can get online. Any questions you have, if you feel like you want to ask them face-to-face personally, please feel free to use that and connect with me via that. And until next time, guys, stay safe out there and enjoy the process.